Imagine sitting in your high school classroom. In the US, the lights dim, the projector flickers to life, and footage fills the screen. Waves crashing on the shores of Normandy, soldiers charging through smoke and gunfire. The teacher begins narrating. This is the day America changed the course of history. You're told about bravery, liberation, and the triumph of freedom. Now jump 5,000 miles east. In Germany, the classroom is silent. No movies, no swelling music, just photocopies of a Holocaust survivor's journal entry being passed around. Later that month, the class will visit a former concentration camp. The teacher begins not with pride, but with a question. How did we let this happen? Same war, two nations, two radically different lessons. World War II is one of the most studied events in history, but where you learn it changes what you believe about it. In the United States, it's the story of courage. In Germany, it warns of what happens when you lose your moral compass. One teaches pride, the other teaches responsibility. And both shape generations in ways that go far beyond the classroom. In the United States, World War II is not just another chapter in history, it's a moment of transformation. The war begins with a sneak attack, Pearl Harbor. It escalates with America stepping in to stop the Axis. The timeline races through key battles, Midway, Normandy, the Bulge, before climaxing with Hiroshima, Nagasaki, and victory. It's the story of the greatest generation, the heroes who saved democracy, a nation that was reluctant to enter war, but once in, led the charge and tipped the scales. Students are taught to remember the bravery of the soldiers, the sacrifices made at home, and the industrial power that turned Detroit was transformed into a hub of military production. The classroom reflects this. Textbooks highlight military strategy and timelines. Lessons focus on key battles, generals, innovations like the atomic bomb, and the economic boom that followed. Memorial Day and Veterans Day reinforce this version of history with parades, speeches, and flags waving over cemeteries. The tone is reverent and proud. There is space for the Holocaust, but often it's a unit within a larger narrative of military triumph. American soldiers are portrayed as liberators, discovering the horrors of the camps as they push toward Berlin. The question of why these camps existed or what more could have been done is often peripheral. There's not always time to dwell on that part. The American student walks away with a clear message. We were the good guys. We fought evil, and we won. Now imagine this, a teenager named Jake, sitting in a US classroom, confidently writing his essay on American triumph in World War II. He ends it with a flourish. We saved the world. A few months later, he's on a summer exchange in Berlin. His host family takes him to Sachsenhausen. Jake walks silently through the former concentration camp, past crumbling barracks and rooms filled with confiscated shoes. His guide stops at the execution trench and says, "This is where the SS practiced shooting prisoners before being deployed to the Eastern Front." Jake can't breathe. Back in the classroom the next day, he's no longer the boy who saw the war as clean and heroic. He's reading survivor testimonies, watching archival footage of Nazi rallies. His German classmates aren't just reciting facts, they're asking, what would we have done? That trip doesn't just teach Jake about Germany. It changes what he thought he knew about himself. But in Germany, the experience is entirely different. There, World War II is not a story of glory. It's not a celebration. It is an excavation. From a young age, often as early as age 10, German students begin learning about the fragility of democracy and how fear and propaganda paved the way for authoritarianism. By the time they're teenagers, they are studying the Nuremberg laws, watching interviews with Holocaust survivors, analyzing Nazi propaganda, and walking through the gates of Dachau, Sachsenhausen, or Buchenwald. Not as tourists, but as students confronting their national past. The goal isn't to glorify anything, it's to understand how a modern educated society could descend into genocide. Unlike in the US, where World War II is often taught as a block in time, Germany's approach is woven across subjects and years. Students might discuss World War II in literature class, studying Anne Frank's diary or reading Primo Levi. They may cover the legal foundations of fascism in civics. And in history, they don't just focus on the battles, they interrogate the choices. What made ordinary people look the other way? How did legal systems enable atrocity? What propaganda techniques were used to turn neighbors into enemies? In Germany, the war doesn't end in 1945. It ends in reflection. And that reflection is not optional. In many federal states, students are required by law to visit Holocaust memorials or former concentration camps. These aren't sanitized places. They are designed to disturb, to unsettle. The goal is not to make students feel guilty, but responsible for memory, vigilance, and preventing it from happening again. This approach shapes how Germans see their own country. While Americans might see their grandfathers as liberators, Germans often see theirs as bystanders. It's personal, painful, but intentional, and it goes beyond education. Look at Germany's national holidays. There's no Victory Day parade, no grand patriotic holiday for World War II. Instead, there's Volkstrauertag, a day of mourning. Flags fly at half-mast. Public figures deliver somber speeches. The message isn't, "Look what we did," it's "Never again." By contrast, in the US, World War II saturates national identity. It's in movies, monuments, games, even fashion. From Saving Private Ryan to Call of Duty, World War II is portrayed as the ultimate good versus evil story. The heroism is real, but reveals little room for moral ambiguity. Meanwhile, German films like Downfall or The Lives of Others take viewers deep into the gray spaces, the complicity, the fear, the humanity of those trapped in the machine of fascism. Even public memory shows the divide. The United States is filled with war memorials that celebrate valor. Walk through Washington, D.C., and you'll find fountains, bronze statues, and towering inscriptions. They echo triumph. Berlin, by contrast, is filled with quiet reminders. Bronze, stumbling stones, engraved with the names of Holocaust victims, dot the sidewalks. There's a memorial to the murdered Jews of Europe, not tucked away, but in the heart of the capital. It's not about pride, it's about presence. Germany's goal isn't to move past its history, but to live with it. The difference in education reflects what each country feels it must be accountable for. America, despite its flaws, sees World War II as its finest hour. Germany sees it as its darkest. One teaches young people to celebrate. The other teaches them to question. This contrast even shapes foreign policy. In the US, belief in its role as a global leader flows directly from World War II. The idea that America must act and lead is rooted in that moment of victory. It justifies interventions, military buildups, and a sense of moral clarity. Haunted by its history of unchecked power, Germany takes the opposite approach. It moves cautiously, prioritizes diplomacy. He hesitates to use military force. It doesn't teach that it must never act. It teaches that it must never act unthinkingly. But Germany isn't alone in carrying the weight of war memory. Across Europe, nations wrestle with how to teach a shared and deeply personal history. In France, the curriculum is built on dual narratives: pride in the French resistance and shame in the collaborationist Vichy regime. French students learn not just about the Nazi occupation, but also how French officials helped round up Jews for deportation. It's a painful balancing act, honoring the brave while confronting the betrayals of their institutions. Memorials like the WWII in Paris do not soften the language. They acknowledge national responsibility. In Italy, the war is taught through the lens of Mussolini's rise and fall. Schools emphasize the political and social conditions that allowed fascism to flourish: economic instability, populist promises, and apathy toward democratic erosion. Students study the seduction of fascist ideology as a cautionary tale. It's not about external invasion. It's about what grew from within. Meanwhile, in the Netherlands, the focus is overwhelmingly on resistance. Students learn about the bravery of citizens who hid Jewish families, produced underground newspapers, and defied Nazi orders. The narrative uplifts stories like Anne Frank's, but often avoids deeper discussions of Dutch collaboration or public indifference during the early years of occupation. It's a proud story, but also a selective one. The war is remembered in Norway as a story of occupation and eventual liberation. British support is highlighted, and the resistance is central. Yet, as with the Netherlands, stories of collaboration receive less attention, keeping the focus on national unity. Eastern European countries face different challenges. In places like Poland and Hungary, World War II is entwined with post-war Soviet occupation. This complicates the narrative. Fascism is condemned, but Stalin's crimes often blur into nationalist tensions. In Russia, the war is known as the Great Patriotic War, taught with unshakable pride. And these attitudes are passed from generation to generation. Ask an American teenager what World War II means, and they might say, freedom. Ask a German teenager, and they might say, responsibility. 2 words, 2 stories, 2 futures. Because history doesn't just explain the past, it shapes the present, and it determines how we walk into what comes next. How were you taught about World War II? Was it a story of heroes and liberation, or a warning about silence and complicity? Share your experience in the comments, especially if you studied in a country outside the US or Germany. We'd love to hear how your classroom shaped your understanding of the war.